Hi, everybody. I'm Katina McHenry, Communications Director here at the McCombs School of Business, and you are joining us today on our Big Idea Show, where we take a deeper look into faculty research happening here at the McCombs School of Business. I am excited about our guest today, who is Andrew Brodsky. He is Assistant Management Professor here at the McCombs School of Business, and I'm really excited to talk to him about his new research about communication and emotions, which is very exciting because it's what we do every day. So Andrew, welcome to the program. It's good to see you.
Great, thanks for having me on.
Yes, absolutely. So we're talking about two of your papers today. They're similar in nature when it comes to the topic. So I first want to talk about your first paper, which is called Virtual Surface Acting in Workplace Interactions, Choosing the Best Technology to Fit the Task. And really, this has a lot to do with the emotions or lack thereof due to COVID, which has forced us to work at home, and how emotion is sometimes forced in the situation, and sometimes emotions are absent in our communication. So can you talk a little bit more about that paper?
Sure. So this topic about emotional labor is this idea that we have to have certain emotions that we display at work. I first became interested in the topic actually long before my PhD when I was working at Hollywood Video. And one of the things they had us do is, if someone brought back a DVD and it's clear they broke it, there's like peanut butter on it, you still have to smile and apologize on behalf of Hollywood Video for the broken DVD. Obviously, they're no longer in business, but this is something that's common to pretty much every job, this idea of service with a smile. And it's not just happy emotions. There's also sometimes you have to display anger, you have to display sadness. There are all these things about these context-appropriate emotions that you need to display for your job, even if you're not feeling them. Oftentimes, maybe you're really stressed due to what's going on with COVID or your spouse's job, but you still have to come into work and be excited about what your subordinates are doing, even if your mind is filled with this kind of stress. And for me, I was interested in studying that, and with particular interest in, how does this work virtually? When we're face-to-face, we have to force the smile.
Right.
Does it go better or is it worse in email versus face-to-face?
Yeah. It's a very interesting topic because obviously being in communications is something you think about and study all the time, not just your emotions, but sometimes verbal communication and nonverbal communication and what that means. And so it's really interesting to read your paper and think about the things we've had to do because we do them virtually. So as you continue to research this topic, what are some of the other things you found? Do you find that people are more stressed? And do you find that it takes a lot more for people to display emotions because they're not feeling that happiness or that joy on the inside? Does it put more stress on the person?
Sure. So, this first paper focuses on, what we call like the interpersonal outcomes of emotional labor. So the thing about emotional labor is, when you're authentic or when you display emotions that are perceived as authentic, you're really smiling, the customer thinks you're happy, it goes over great. But if a customer or anyone else, a coworker, a subordinate, superior, thinks you're being inauthentic, even if the reason that you're being inauthentic is because you have to for the situation, you have to for part of your job, you end up being punished. Being inauthentic can destroy trust. It can hurt customer loyalty. On the organizational side, if employees are inauthentic, it can hurt profits. There's a lot of stories now about, CEOs who've done apologies that have come off as inauthentic.
Right.
So in this paper, I tackled the question of, if you're going to have to be inauthentic here, and there's lots of good reasons why you might have to be, you're stressed otherwise, but you need to be happy here, which medium is best?
Mm-hmm.
And in the paper, there's kind of twofold findings. One is, if you're being authentic, you want to do the richest medium possible. So that's like face-to-face, video conferencing, if you're truly being authentic. But, if you're stressed, if you're just not feeling the emotion, but you do have to display it. For instance, maybe you are, as a negative example, you have to unfortunately fire an employee who has been performing poorly, but you still want to be really supportive of them and say nice things to them, even though you're somewhat relieved this employee is off your team. In that case, I find that telephone or audio, this kind of middle richness communication, is actually best. And the idea being that when you're faking it, you don't want to go face to face because there's this emotional leakage. People often pick up on unconscious cues. When I interviewed and surveyed a bunch of people, they said that email is probably best when you're baking it. But I find that's not the case. I find that yes, while email masks this kind of emotional leakage that comes through, it's actually just seen as really inauthentic mode of communication altogether.
Right.
So telephone's like this sweet spot where it's not seen as an inauthentic mode of like email, but on the other side of that, it doesn't give too much away like face-to-face communication or video conferencing would.
Yeah. And that's interesting because I think people are using the phone less
Mhm.
over, I don't know, since smartphones became what they are and
Yeah.
texting became what it is. So that's a really interesting discovery. Well, let's talk about your second paper, which is a similar tie-in to your first one. The second one's called Beyond the Emoticon. Are there unintentional cues of emotion in email? So you talked a little bit about that just now, but can you describe more about what that means when it comes to just email and emoticons?
Sure. So this is a project I did with a doctoral student, Haley Blunden at Harvard Business School. And approaching this, we were interested in, do we send more emotions than we realize in email? So, face to face, a lot of the way we interpret emotions is through nonverbal behavior. And a lot of that nonverbal behavior isn't even intentional on the part of the person communicating. Whereas in email, we often, the way we show emotions is through word choice or punctuation and, an exclamation mark or emoticons.
Right.
But the thing is, all those cues are really intentional, right? You don't accidentally put a smiley face emoticon in an email. So we were curious if there were any unintentional cues of emotion in email. And what we find in the paper across 6 studies is that email typos actually convey emotion. Now, they don't convey a specific emotion like happiness or sadness. What they are is they're kind of an emotional amplifier. It's like sticking your fist up in the air. That can mean you're really proud, really happy, really angry. But what it does is sticking your fist in the air, it kind of amplifies the emotions that you're displaying. And in the same way, we find that when there's an angry email, typos make the email seem angrier. When there's a happy email, typos make the email seem happier.
Interesting. I had no idea that typos meant that much. And it's funny because you see a lot of people in their emails on their phone where
Mhm.
they excuse themselves because of the typos. And I
Yeah.
guess it's just one of those conscious, unconscious things that you do.
So yeah, it's interesting. Part of what makes this such an interesting emotional cue is this idea that, most of the cues in email are cheap, right? Someone puts an emoticon in there. Do you really believe that emoticon, particularly in a situation where, you're not sure if they're being authentic or not? The idea about typos is they're kind of a costly cue. And what we mean by costly cue is that typos really make you look dumb. We actually show that they make you look a lot less intelligent. So you'd be unlikely to fake typos. So as a result, we would predict, although we don't explicitly study this, that they would tend to be more believable
Hmm.
because they are more costly and because they are seen as unintentional. And the kind of idea behind why these occur is that, your emotions overwhelm you so much that you're not thinking about what you're doing. And that's how the people on the other side interpret it is, oh, the person was so emotional that, they must have, that must be why they made the typos there.
Yeah.
And we actually have one other interesting finding in there is we find that in emotional emails, typos are forgiven a little bit more than in unemotional emails.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so is it the reader or the writer that interprets how much emotion is in the email?
So we only look at the reader, the
Okay.
recipients.
Yeah.
So we are looking at how recipients interpret emotions there. We see that recipients kind of see a typo and then it amplifies whatever other emotion they perceived in the message.
Yeah.
And their idea is they're kind of looking for something, some reasoning, some attribution for the typo.
Yeah.
So when there's emotion, they attach it to emotion. When there's no emotion, they attach it only purely to the person being generally less intelligent or rushed or something else. So that's part of the reason why typos are forgiven a little bit more in emotional emails is that they tend to be say, oh, it's because they were emotional. So you can
Right.
get away with them a little bit more.
Right. How should people continue to go forward in making sure that they're emotionally authentic in their communications as we may be in this virtual situation for a little bit longer than we expected?
So, the one key takeaway that I have here is, be thoughtful and mindful about the choices you're making and how you're communicating. be mindful about, how's the medium you're choosing going to send information to the other person. Try and put yourself in their head and think about, well, how are they going to interpret this, as opposed to how do I expect someone else would interpret this. And yeah, so the idea here is just really think about what you do, as opposed to just be automatic as you're writing these things.
Yeah, that's great advice. Well, I think we'll end it right there. Thank you so much, Andrew, for joining us today. This has been such a great conversation. I could talk to you probably another hour or so just on this topic of communication. So thank you again for your time and your insight and your research. And thank you for joining us on our program today.
Great. Thanks for hosting me today.
You're welcome. If you want to read the paper, we have links to both of Andrew's papers in this video. So feel free to click on either of those to read more in depth about his research. Thank you so much for joining us today on our Big Ideas Show. We will see you next time.